Good morning and welcome to the Veterans Program. Today we have another fellow who's done some good service for the country, and he's going to share some of his thoughts with us. The program is coming to you from the Pittsfield Community Television Station here on Frederico Drive in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And we welcome you, and we ask that you, if you will, come and join us with your stories. Hale, for the record, will you tell us your name, spell your last name, and give us your service dates and the branch of service that you are in, please?
Yes, my name is Hale Carey, C-A-R-E-Y, and my time in the service was from April 18th, 1951 to February 1954.
Good.
I was in the Tank Corps, 3rd Armored Division. That's George Patton's old outfit. He had died by the time I got into it 5 years later.
Oh, but at least he knew you were coming. So.
Oh, yes.
Well, that's good. Now, what I'd like to do is try to build up a little history so that people know who you are, where you came from, and how you came into being what you were today. For example, where were you born and when, and what was your childhood like going back there in the early Depression days, if you will?
Well, the Depression days were so hard for everybody, but I was blessed. My father earned enough money for us to be able to eat, and I was born and raised in Briarcliff, New York, which is outside New York City up the Hudson River, near the Sing Sing prison.
Oh.
And I can remember even as early as the Hopman case when the Lindbergh trial went on and the child was stolen, and they rushed us kids into the house. So it's going back a bit. I was born at the time of the Wall Street crash.
Oh, what was your birth date?
January 8th, 1930.
Okay,
about 6 weeks after the crash.
Wow. Okay.
So it's going back a bit. I had two older sisters, a younger brother, and life was marvelous until Dad did leave home. There was a problem with the marriage, and he left home. But he always raised us, and he fed us well. And then, but life went downhill after I was about 14. Mother died when I was 14, and so we were sent out. We had to be sent somewhere, so we were sent to some boarding schools, and so I spent about 5 years at a boarding school. I would come home in the summer, and my sister would really replace my mother, and she was marvelous.
So she helped raise you.
Oh yeah, it was great. Now she married a guy who had been in the Marines, he was my hero, and Jack was in the 3rd Marines, and he was wounded at Bougainville. He was the first man off his barge. He was in the first wave going into Bougainville in November 1943. And he was months in the hospital getting that leg straightened out. He was hit by an American 45, and that belonged in the hands of a Japanese major. And it was weird. And he was asked, we asked him, what did it feel like? And he said it was like being hit with kicked by a donkey or something, or a horse. And but he was badly hit. So anyway, he used to say, well, you don't want to be a damn draftee. And so that gives me a chance to say I want to say the most I can for the draftees of this country, because they don't get a lot of credit. They don't have a lot of eliteness and fame and all these things, but they've died all over the world for our country. And I have no regrets at all about being a draftee. I was, the war was over in 45, and then Korea came along. Now, Korea was not some play game thing. Korea was, there were over 50,000 casualties in Korea. And so when I got a draft notice, of course I didn't want to be a draftee. I went down to the Marine recruiting office and said I'd like to sign up. And they said, you got a draft number? I said, yes. They said, we can't touch it.
Oh.
So that was the end of that. Well, my outfit, after boot camp in the infantry, the whole outfit was shipped to Korea. I was the only one who didn't go to Korea. And a guy came up to me on the rifle range. I was a raw recruit. I'd never seen a guy in my life. And he said, you want to go to OCS? Huh? You can be an officer. And I said, yeah. Yeah, an officer and a general and all that at once. I didn't go to college, so I thought this was my chance. Yeah. But they sent me to non-com school first, which was about I think, 8 weeks. Boot camp was 14 weeks, and we were all in pretty good shape. Then I had went down. It turned out to be the Tank Corps, 3rd Armored Division at Louisville, Kentucky. So that was 22 weeks of absolutely exhausting. We were running everywhere, but at the end of 22 weeks, I was my commanding officer failed me. He said, "You're not officer material." So I was feeling pretty lousy about that. But then an Army lawyer came up to me and said, "You can fight this if you want a courts martial." I said, "Yes." So they gave me a courts martial, and I won it. And they said they gave me the great privilege of starting all over again, 22 more weeks.
22 more weeks.
I mean, we're climbing ropes. You hardly sleep. Oh. And you're sitting in classes learning all this stuff. And so anyway, to make a long story as monotonous as I possibly can, I was wound up in the 3rd Armored Division, and I was a platoon leader really for a few weeks, but then I was made an instructor. And that's the best thing. I really got a lot out of that. And we taught over 100 different courses. We were called the Driving and Maintenance Committee of the division. And
where was this? Where were you stationed at the time?
Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Okay, all right.
Fort Knox, Kentucky. Yeah, no, please do ask. So anyway, the instruction is, you really learn when you teach. That's when you learn the most. And so we were teaching over 100 different courses, whether it was first aid or how to get out of an escape hatch at the bottom of that tank, that you never button up that tank unless you're in real trouble, because you're in trouble when you have to button up.
Okay, these are little things you'll
learn. Oh, yeah. And so and you have to learn adapt your eyes to the dark, all kinds of little courses that we had to give, because these were hundreds and hundreds of companies coming through, going to Korea, and you want to do the best you could for these guys. Yeah. Absolutely. And I was never sent over. But and so I really feel a little embarrassed that I'm here when so many good servicemen went overseas and volunteered for this and volunteered for that. But anyway, the high point of the instruction was that 2nd Army decided to have an inspection. And I had 3 different generals come into my class at different points. It scared me out of my wits, because I could see them back there, and they have an assistant taking a pencil, marking you, and you're talking to, company guys. So anyway, we were about a dozen instructors, as I remember, and we had a very good commanding officer. He was a captain when we met him, and he became a major. And he had, I think, the DSC for attacking a German tank with a little General Sherman tank. The General Sherman mounted, originally, when it started out, they mounted a 35-millimeter gun, which wasn't a pea shooter against the German 88. So finally, they upgraded the tank to a 46-millimeter gun, rifle, and that still wasn't too great. And so I learned on that. Anyway, this wonderful commander of mine attacked a German 88 from the rear. He saw him coming down the road, way down. He ducked into a barn, closed the door. The Germans went by, and he opened the door and fired on the rear of that tank and stopped. The turret started to move, and it stopped because they were vulnerable from the rear. So he got a high award of some. He got a big award. I think it was the DSC.
Distinguished Service Cross, yeah.
Yeah.
If you use initials, tell the folks what they stand for.
The Distinguished Service Cross is really very important.
Yeah.
And this was one tough little Bantam rooster, I want to tell you. He's the only captain I ever saw that chewed out a lieutenant colonel on his property, because he knew that colonel was out of order. He said, just a minute, Colonel, out of my tank park. You're in my tank park. Yeah. And that colonel walked right out because he knew he was wrong.
Now, did you have any specialty in that 100 different courses that you, if you will, felt comfortable with, excelled in, or did you have to master all 100 and something? How'd you work that?
No, they had wonderful training aids. I mean, we would go down 6 in the morning and set up our classroom. And if we were very unlucky, the major might show up there to check out were you there and were you doing it right. So anyway, we would go to the sergeant of supply and draw they were great big banners or charts was showing how to repair a track in combat
big
conditions.
visual aids, then, yeah.
There were visual aids, and we had pointers, and we had to be able to say, after about 10 minutes into the class, you'd have to say, "Wake that man up," because they were all going to sleep. And so you didn't point to anybody; you just pointed, and they'd all look around, and they'd say, I'm awake,
Yeah, not me, it's him.
But they need that. And I'd say, stand up on your feet, and get some rest and change. It would help them to focus their attention because you're talking to the least of the guys. It's not the smartest kid in the class. It's the kid who's having trouble, and he's got to know this stuff.
Yeah, because his life depends on it.
Beg pardon?
His life would depend on it, plus
Absolutely,
his buddies.
and his buddies. So I would say, is this clear in your mind? And you have to. Let me give an example of that. One of the things we had to teach the guys was to lead a tank in the tank park. And the tank park is all churned up because it's 46 tons of weight churning up that ground. So now I'm out there with about 8 guys, and I said, if you are leading this tank, you walk away from the tank. That's 47 tons or whatever it was. You don't want to have that roll over you. So
you're walking to the side rather
you
than
always
front?
walk away. You're not looking at the tank. You're walking away from that tank, and you're giving hand signals, whether it means stop, left, right, or whatever it was. And we knew them then, but I've forgotten them now. But the point is that this kid falls down right away. I've talked to him 3 times about it, but he does exactly what I told him not to do. He's going backwards, and he tripped over a big chunk of. So I'm running along. I'm scared stiff he's going to get crushed. So I'm up on the fender hollering, "Stop that foolish tank," right?
Okay.
You know how it goes?
Yeah.
And my problem was to stop the tank. He was fine. But the driver's sitting way low, and he couldn't see this guy. So my problem was that the colonel was out there that day, and he saw it. He said, "Who's in charge here?" My arm is still sore from saluting. And yes, sir. No excuse, sir. But that was a bad day. Very bad day.
But you didn't get the guy crushed, though.
No, he didn't. He lived.
Okay.
So that was wonderful. But the little things that happen,
Yeah.
And some of these poor guys who had almost no education. They'd come from a little country town in somewhere, and now they're in the Army and they're in the tank corps. They're going to learn to be a driver. They're going to learn to be a gunner, or they're going to learn to be a loader, or machine gunner.
How did they separate one from the other? Did the guys volunteer, or did they just say,
no,
we need 15 drivers, 15 loaders, 15 gunners, or whatever?
I think what they did most was they would grade you on how efficient you were with a water-cooled machine gun, a 50 caliber machine gun, a hand grenade, a 45 revolver, your driving of the tank, your loading of the tank, whatever you were doing, they were graded on it. One way or another. Somebody took a little. There was somebody in that, probably in that company, but I don't know who did it. But there was a way of telling who's the best at this, or what are you best at.
What your best aptitudes are.
After your brief course of, you had about 14 weeks of training for tank corps, and then you'd be off to Korea. So it had to be fast, and it had to be as accurate as you could make it. I didn't make those decisions. I just taught the course.
Now, do you ever have any follow-up of some of the guys that went through your early classes that went to Korea, Busan, Chosun, and get word back that what you had trained them to do saved their butt in playing
No,
Yankee?
I would love to. That would have been really nice, but no, that never happened. There were hundreds and hundreds. Company would have about 60 men in them, I think. I'm forgetting now. But it would be a full room. And so we'd never see them again.
Oh.
Or I might be back for 2 or 3 courses. Some course might take 2 or 3 days, and they'd come back for a morning, or they'd come back for an afternoon. But you'd never get to know them. Okay. Never get to know them.
Well, it's just as well sometimes because you don't know the guys.
It would be very upsetting to find out they didn't come back. Now, one of our officers that was, like myself, an instructor, was a wonderful guy. His name was Lieutenant Stacy. He was given a battlefield commission in Korea, and he'd been a sergeant, and he came back. So now he's giving courses, and he spoke with a thick accent because he was born in Italy. And one day, it was some smart kid start to ask too many questions. He said, "Hey, we got a sharpshoot here." He went to work on that kid. sit down, next, you know. And then he went on with what he was going to talk about. But he didn't like the two smart college types. Not for a bit. He didn't like them. And of course, it was hilarious.
It had a built-in prejudice. You know.
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes that can backfire, though. You know, you disturb the guy who may be the best qualified. You say, you know, why are you ratting on me?
This was Lieutenant States. Each of us has our own way, and you had to admire this lieutenant. He'd come up the hard way.
Okay.
And
now, when did you get your commission? How'd you qualify for that?
Well, that was nearly a complete failure. I went through 22 weeks of this training, and my commanding officer said, failed me, and he said, "You don't have officer. You're not officer material, or he is not officer material." And so I was feeling lousy when about this. But then a guy came. If I'm repeating myself, tell me. An Army lawyer type of guy came up to me and said, "You can have a courts-martial if you want to fight this." And I said, "Yes, I do." So I went through a courts-martial and I won it. So they sent me back for 22 more weeks from the whole thing all over again. So I want to tell you, by the time I finished that, I was a well-qualified new officer, and I was in good shape.
Yeah, all deja vu every time you went to class.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, it's exhausting. One man died. We had to run everywhere. And it was very hot in the summer at Fort Knox. It got up to like 100 and 100. And one guy died of heat. So they stopped the running. I was delighted. We didn't have to run to classes and run here and run there. We had a double time everywhere. And so they stopped that right in the middle of my training. We were allowed to walk to lunch.
That's the important thing, yeah. Now, was there anything special that you seemed to relish or you excelled in as far as your training and teaching capabilities?
Say that again, Bob. I didn't quite get that.
In all of the things that you taught, was there one or two particular things that you really felt you had to drill into the guys to make damn sure they knew what they were doing, and you felt you had accomplished that?
Well, yeah, I think maybe. And the main thing was to have confidence in your outfit, and you're working together, you're a team, and you're looking out for one another. And so you do your best not to let anybody down. A tank crew is a tremendous thing. It's like a submarine crew. They go into a bar. If anybody attacks a tanker, you got 5 men fighting.
Oh, be warned.
It's like guys. Sometimes guys love to fight, and they get into a bar and they're looking for a fight. If you hit a submarine guy, you got a problem because he's got about
all the guys are with him. Yeah.
All the guys are with him.
Now,
and tankers are a bit that way.
How do they go about assigning or amassing a tank crew? Your gunner, your loader, your driver, and so forth. Did they pull them from different pools and then train them together, or how did you handle that?
I can't remember. All I can tell you is that we would give these courses, whether it was first aid or whether it was how to replace a wheel on a broken tank. But how it was, I can't answer your question. I don't remember what the procedure was. I think that would depend on the company and the company commander of each group.
Okay.
I think he would, after all, he's going to be a tanker himself.
Yeah.
And he isn't company commander for the heck of it. He's trained to know his men and which one of them is reliable, which one's not, which one's skilled at this, which one's not. Yeah. And so that's out of my hands.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's the best answer I can give you.
Well, it's a good answer. Because what I was trying to do was find out, many times I've had some fellows in the Air Force, the Army Air Force and the U.S. Air Force. There's a little difference there over time. And they'd have kind of a staging or marshalling area. There'd be a bunch of guys, if you will, from flight school, maintenance, flying, somewhere, somehow, they'd need so many guys to make up a crew. Yeah. Once they were assigned, that was their crew, that was their ship, that was their gang. As you say, you mess with me, there's 9 guys in back of me.
Yeah, right. Well, I can't remember. It would seem to me that it should be said that in Korea, the tank warfare was so different than in North Africa. North Africa was tank versus tank, which was an enormous carnage. I mean, anti-tank weapons called a heat round. When it hits the metal side of the tank, it melts its way through the side of the tank, and it is the wet metal that turns hard inside the tank and kills you. Not good.
No.
So this was not tank versus tank warfare in Korea. It was tanks and infantry. And the tanks were used as artillery a lot in Korea. It was mountainous territory. And so they would position the tank. The tank would, a tank platoon or even a tank company would be attached to an infantry outfit. And but the commander, there was a command friction there because the tank commander would fight like hell for his independence of the commander of the infantry unit. He would say, "I'll tell you where my tanks will go and where they don't go, and don't give me any." I forget how it goes.
Yes.
And so that was always a friction. But they were. Am I answering your question?
Yeah.
One thing I forgot to mention during the instruction, the thing that meant so much to me was that after, 2 or 3 years of teaching, we got pretty good at it, and we had this big inspection, and 4 of us got a superior rating, and which just comes from practice. But I even have here the original. You can't, maybe you can't see it, but it shows the inspector is writing down. Did he speak clearly? Did he lie in his teeth? Did he do this? Did he do that? And finally, I got one right, and that was just at the right time.
As long as it was right at the right time.
My commanding officer forgave me for everything.
Yeah. Okay. You just happened to have this with you.
It just flew right in the window. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All superiors.
That's the only time it ever happened.
Yeah, but that's what the time it counts, okay? Now, in this package, there are some other things I'd like you to kind of walk through as far as your history, if you will, your boxing prowess, for example. I'm not leading you down the path.
No,
it's something you got to show off.
Put it this way. I'm sitting with 4 guys, after we've been officers for a while, I'm sitting with 4 or 5 officers, and I was very thankful to have been made an instructor. Whether they were instructors or not, I can't remember now, but they were really bored. And that was really why they signed up for, we were having a bull session. Mm-hmm. And I remember them saying, we're putting in for Korea. I want overseas. And they were bored stiff. That's really what it was. They didn't like instructing or whatever is the way they were doing. And so off they went. And I found out that 2 of them never came back. And I thought to myself, that's awful.
Oh.
That's awful. Anyway, so I sort of forgotten where we were.
Your boxing
my boxing career. Well, that was very brief. That ran about 6 months or something. And I found out that one of the most famous boxing gyms in the country was Columbia Gym in Louisville, Kentucky. So I joined this. And it was run by the Police Athletic League of the city of Louisville, Kentucky. And these old guys were wonderful. And they would teach us how to, just learning the fundamentals of boxing. Mm-hmm. It was Golden Gloves is what it was. So
this is why you were in the service.
No, it had nothing to do. I was bored.
Oh.
And
okay.
This was after I got my commission. Okay. Then I had some free time. I mean, I'd been running all the way through OCS. Now we had a little free time, so I went into Louisville and there were some nice girls there in town that we got to know, and so while I was in Louisville, I also joined the Police Athletic League, and I started boxing. And so one night, we were doing good. We had one of the best fights on the ticket, and I thought I had it won, but I never saw where the guy hit me. I wound up flat on the pancake, looking at the lights, and I heard 6, 7. And it was called a technical knockout. And that was the end for me. You asked me a question, I'm telling you, I didn't want my brain scrambled. I said to the old police guy afterwards, I said, this is enough for me. I'm getting out of here. And he understood.
I'd like you to talk about that a little bit, the one I saw before here, about some of the guys that you boxed. This little fella right here. Excuse me a minute. I got to get this thing.
Well, this is...
If you will.
All right. This was... The Louisville Courier was the big newspaper. All right, this was the big newspaper in Louisville. So after our fight, they ran an article in the sports on the front page of the sports section and said Louisville boxers beat Evansville, and I look real good here. That was when I was winning the bout, but I didn't win, as it turned out. I was cold-cocked. But I had the pleasure of almost winning, put it that way. So this is just a piece from the newspaper, and then they gave me the photograph, another photograph that I could keep. And the funny thing is, on the back of the photograph, it shows the scribbling of the photographer down there at the ring, and he says the loser is and the winner is, and then he waits to see who it is.
Okay.
And he scratches in the name and sends it in. You know, it was fun to see it. So,
okay.
That was the end of it.
Who's the guy? I want to know.
This guy,
tell him.
Oh, the guy's name was Hubert Thompson. And the trouble with Hubert, and the other one was me, and Hubert, unfortunately, was tall and had long arms. That's the worst thing. Because if you don't have the long arms, there's only one way to win that fight, and that's to get in and hit him hard, get close. Okay. And you're going to have to take a few hits to get there. But if you try to outdistance him in the ring, you're dead. If you don't have the longer arm.
Okay, because he could just get you no matter which way you go.
Oh, he's going to kill you. So you get in close, hit the body hard, and get his attention, and in close.
Okay. Now you had some mention I hear though of some guy named Cassius Clay.
Yeah, about 2 years.
About
2 years after I left that gym, a young fellow wanted to try his hand at boxing, and his name was Cassius Clay. He became Muhammad Ali. I never saw him, but he came about 2 years after I was there.
Okay, all right.
So it was a good gym. It was a very good gym.
Now, you've gone through 2 years training other guys.
Yeah.
Where were you, if you will, when your time was up? What did you do after that, when you left the service?
When I left the service, I got back into advertising sales. I sold advertising for the New York Herald Tribune before I went in the service. I went to high school only. I didn't go to college, so I went to work as a salesman of advertising, classified, for the New York Herald Tribune, and it was the best training I could possibly get. And the Tribune no longer around, but we used to compete with the New York Times. And so then I came back after the service. I went back to work. I got jobs selling advertising for trade papers and business magazines. And I wound up with a very good firm, which is Dun & Bradstreet. And I spent over 10 years with Dun & Bradstreet. Dun & Bradstreet's known for rating companies' financial condition. But they also had a very fine magazine competing with, it was called Dunn's Review. And Dunn's Review is one of the oldest publications in the country. And people don't realize that one of the reporters for Dun & Bradstreet was a fellow named Abraham Lincoln. That's how old that paper was.
Way back when.
Yeah. If you wanted to know, you're sending a boxcar load of nails out to Central Illinois, you'd ask a guy named Lincoln, give me a report on this guy. Somebody ordered 2 carloads of nails, and before we send it, is he reliable? And Lincoln could say, oh no, his house was burned by Indians, he moved north.
Oh.
That's what it was
all
about. Credit was started. That's how credit started.
Okay, all right.
And so so I went back to and stayed in the trade paper business, or in the business. Now, Dunn's Review was a very fine property, and we had to compete with Wall Street Journal, Business Week, Fortune, mostly Fortune. Now, I can tell you, the ad agencies wouldn't recommend us. Our page rate was low.
Oh. Now, were you or were you not qualified or allowed to participate in GI Bill? Did you take any advantage of something like that?
Yeah, that was good. That was good. I went to New York University for I think 1 year at night school, and it was interesting. I never got a degree. I never, I was never out of the freshman class at NYU, but I didn't care. It was very, very interesting to learn some of these things. But I stayed in business all my life.
Okay.
I married shortly after that.
On the other side of the coin, when did you get married, and to whom did you marry?
Oh, I married a wonderful girl. Penelope is my wife, and she and I have 4 kids. We adopted 1, and they've had 7 grandchildren. So we've got seven
Wow.
grandchildren from 2.5 years. The only girl out of 6 boys, the last one was a girl, and of course we didn't care. We would never spoil a kid like that. If you believe that, I'll tell you another one. Anyway,
no comment.
It's wonderful, and the oldest one is 18, and we're so proud of him. He got a job with the Berkshire Oh boy, I'm having trouble remembering it. It's one of the best acting clubs. I know nothing about theater, but he was an actor all summer, and he got paid for it too by the Berkshire something or other.
A theater down in Stockbridge?
Yeah, down in Barrington. But they moved up to. They now moved their offices and their theater up to Pittsfield, and it's a wonderful outfit. And I'm having trouble remembering what they call it, but it's. They teach they encourage young people to get into the theater and learn it.
Sure.
Boy, they work hard. But he had a great summer with us, and we had a great summer with him this last summer.
Now, what do you and Penny do now that you retired and living the soft life, as sometimes they say?
Well, it's like
I know a lot of your history, but let you tell it.
Well, we've decided that the kids didn't come when the babies were born. We wouldn't get to see them, so we're sitting around waiting to hear from the kids. Well, that's normal, and because they have their lives to live. So we moved up to the Berkshires and never regretted it. We've been here about 15 years, and. But we're active in our church and in the community, and it's a lot of fun. It's so rewarding.
Active doing what? That's a
doing
broad
what?
scope.
Volunteer work.
Kinds of things you do.
All right. For example, Penny was the head of volunteers for elder services, so I found myself doing Meals on Wheels or backing her up if a volunteer got sick and couldn't do it. Why then maybe I would take the person to the hospital and drive them back.
Transport, yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you're doing Meals on Wheels work, that's a very rewarding job because you get to know people, and it turns out it's not just the food. Some of the widows are very lonely, and they may be living in a small cabin in the woods somewhere. And you're really there to look in and see that they're all right. And if anything goes amiss, you're the only contact with them. And
kind of a big brother.
You have to use some common sense. And when in doubt, call headquarters and say, I think there's a problem here. This lady's very lonely, or she's not well. Beg pardon?
Did you ever have to do
Sure.
something like that?
Many times I would call and say, I think Mrs. So-and-so really needs attention. You should be out here and have a look at this.
Okay.
For this, that, or the other symptom.
They'd send out what, a policeman, a fireman, or
no,
something like that?
Elder Services is very well organized, and they know, depending on what the problem is, they send the right person from Elder Services to get out there.
So it was very rewarding in that respect.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, it's an honor to work with them. I also watercolor, and I found that a lot of fun. I've been watercoloring for about 25 years. And sketching, and it's just a lot of fun.
Good. Now, how about your work down Chesterwood?
Oh yeah, Chesterwood. Yeah, right. Yeah, I've been a tour guide at Chesterwood, and for about I'd say 8 years or 7 years, something like that. And it's been a learning experience, absolutely, because they train us very carefully to understand this. Chesterwood was the summer home, for those who've never heard of it.
There you go.
Was the summer home of Daniel Chester French. Mr. French was the sculptor of the Minuteman at the North Bridge in Concord, Massachusetts in 1875. And he also was the sculptor of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington. He's a marvelous sculptor. And so our job there is to help people to know more about it. It's a beautiful property. He loved it. And when we have people come, sometimes 60 people on a bus at one clip, we have to divide it up, get a couple of tour guides. But the point is that people really love to see the gardens are pretty, the land is pretty, and his studio is fascinating. All kinds of human figures in that studio. Can I mention one?
Sure.
One of them people don't pay much attention to, but it's a nude statue, a nude male figure with he has a torch in his hand. And Mr. French always had a message for what he did. And he says, this is called, well, first of all, this is calling attention to the bloodbath called World War I. And he calls it Passchendaele. Passchendaele was the largest cemetery probably in Europe at any time. And it resulted from the Battle of Ypres, Y-P-R-E-S, in Belgium, where tens of thousands upon thousands of young Englishmen died fighting the Germans. And so it's a wonderful statue. And people don't realize what it's about.
Well,
because time goes
that's
on.
the job of a docent.
And that's what a docent's
bring
job
'em in,
is.
yeah.
Right, right.
And it's fun, it's challenging, but as you said earlier, though, the best way to learn is to try to teach.
I think so. And they're so, the people that come through are so nice. You know, I don't hear complaints. They really want to learn. And they appreciate hearing about a little bit about American history. It's really a study in American history.
Yeah,
Really
great.
good.
Well, all in all, what do you feel or remember that your service has done with respect to making you a better person, or opened up doors for you, or made you just feel good? What's your reaction to it?
Oh, I'm honored to have been in the service. I'm so glad I was, and I want to speak up again for the draftees of this nation. A draftee should not feel ashamed that he didn't win some award. The draftees are just as, they bleed just as well as anybody else,
Yeah.
and they do, each person does their best. And yes, the instruction experience I had has helped me all my life. I didn't go to college, so I wound up learning. I read books. And I'm thankful that I've had so many blessings in my life and been able to feed the family.
Good. Amen.
So.
Okay. Now, I guess we're going to have to wrap this up right now. And as the man said, all I can say is thank you. We appreciate what you've done. And more important, I think you've done a lot to, what's the word, bring in the fact that everybody, regardless of where you were in the strata, had a job to do, and you did it well. And all of those little pieces always added up to make a successful end. And that's the important thing.
Right. That's right.
If that makes sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, it keeps you right size, you know, if you're in the service. It really keeps you right size.
Yeah.
You're one of a number of people. You're in a team.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to steal a couple of minutes of my own. Today is a few days away from what us older guys used to remember as Armistice Day. Today they call it Veterans Day. 11/11/11/11. Most people today know what 9/11 is. Very few people are alive to remember 11/11/11/11. Historically, it was the day, the 11th minute, the 11th hour, or the 11th day, or the 11th month, when the armistice was signed, supposedly ending all wars with the cessation of World War I. Unfortunately, history kind of put the kibosh to some of that, and we all know, Hale and all the other guys that have come down, the guys and you gals who served, war isn't good. There's all kinds of terms for it. It doesn't settle anything, and the bad part about it is it causes an awful lot of heartache. It causes some good memories, but what I'd like to say today, on the 11th, coming up in a few days, November 11th, take a few moments off. Just sit down quietly by yourself. If you've ever had anybody in your family, friend, relative, who has served, and fortunately they're with you, but also take a few moments to reflect on the millions of people who have gone beyond, what they did, what they tried to do, and what impact they may or may not have had. It's a wonderful world. It's just too bad we have to fight so hard to make it a good place. We invite you all again. This is a standard invitation, if you will. Any guy, any gal, particularly some of you fellows from the Korean War, and you nurses, and WACs and WAVES and RENs and so on, we'd like to have you come and share your stories with us. We all can't be heroes, that's not the bit, but we all, who ever did anything, did it, I believe, to the best of our ability to make this a very good, fulfilled picture. And that's what this whole Navy project is all about, the Veterans History Project. They try to get people from all walks of life, no matter what branch of service you've come in, to share, as we've said before, your services. Good memories, bad memories, but each one is a piece of that puzzle. And the more places that we can fill rather than have holes, the better the story is going to be. Okay? Again, we thank you. Come and see us. We're here to help, and we're here to have you have a good time. Bob Stevens saying thank you and goodbye.